Never seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog, and yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and I'm joined by Beth Turner again. We're on your TV, radio and online, and after yesterday's huge political announcement, we will be here until midday with lots of discussion, expert guests and analysis, and our opinions, as well as yours.
That's right, there is a lot to pick over today. We are at the start of a fierce Conservative leadership battle, the results of which will affect all of us. So let us know what you think lies ahead on GB Views at gbnews.uk or on Twitter at GBNews. But first, here are the latest headlines.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 10. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. We start with the breaking news that former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, former Japanese Prime Minister, has died after being shot this morning at a campaign event. Our Home and Security Editor Mark White can bring us the latest. Mark, what more can you tell us?
Well, a shocking event that unfolded this morning as Shinzo Abe was in the southern city of Nara giving a stump speech for a political friend of his when a man, we understand, got to within a few feet of him and then opened fire. Now, Shinzo Abe, we're told, suffered gunshot injuries to his neck and to his chest. He was rushed to hospital, given emergency surgery and blood transfusions, but he has now, according to official sources in Japan, lost his fight for life. All the more shocking, given the fact that in Japan, gun crime is very rare. An average year, there are no more than half a dozen gun-related deaths compared to a country like America, where it's up about 35,000. And Shinzo Abe, of course, a very well-known and respected political figure right across the world, but especially so in Japan. The country's longest-serving prime minister was in office for a year in 2006, then returned to office between 2012 and 2020 when he had to retire because of ill health. As far as the suspect's concerned, he's a 41-year-old man, we're told, who was arrested at the scene. He offered no resistance after he opened fire, allegedly, on the former Japanese Prime Minister. We're told, according, again, to sources from law enforcement agencies in Japan, that he was a former member of the Japan Defence Forces, a Navy serviceman. He's been taken into custody now for questioning. The inevitable question, of course, is how on earth he managed to get so close to Shinzo Abe with a weapon. Again, some suggestions that the weapon that he was brandishing may have been a self-made weapon, some kind of double-barreled shotgun.
Mark, thank you. Mark White, our Home and Security Editor there for us. Now back here, the race for who's going to replace Boris Johnson as Prime Minister following his resignation yesterday as leader of the Conservative Party has begun. With no clear front-runner, around a dozen potential candidates are assessing whether they have the support to mount leadership bids. Tom Tugendhat, the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee chairman, has become the first contender to throw his hat in the ring. It's believed former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and ex-Health Secretary Sajid Javid could also be considering the job. But Labour's Shadow Trade Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds told GB News this morning there should be a general election. Meanwhile, there's growing pressure on Boris Johnson to step down immediately rather than wait for a new leader. Former Prime Minister Sir John Major is among those backing Deputy PM Dominic Raab to take over in the interim. But Downing Street said Mr Johnson feels a strong sense of duty to stay on. Yesterday's address to the nation came after a slew of resignations and a cabinet reshuffle, which saw a number of key ministers replaced. New Education Secretary James Cleverly's told GB News he'll be waiting until he sees the full slate before deciding who to support.
Personal circumstances mean that I won't be putting myself forward, but I'm also confident that we have a pool of talent which will enable us to choose someone with fantastic experience, whoever that might be. And once a successor has been chosen, the Prime Minister will stand down and hand over. And I think that is the most, I think that's the most pragmatic, professional, and least disruptive way of doing it.
Well, MP for Shipley, Philip Davis, told GB News he doesn't see any reason why Boris Johnson shouldn't continue until a successor has been found.
I don't understand this idea that he should have to step down straight away. When Theresa May resigned in similar circumstances, she carried on, and nobody batted an eyelid about that. When David Cameron resigned, he carried on until we'd found a successor, and nobody batted an eyelid about that either. I mean, that's what always happens, is that the current Prime Minister and the current leader stays on until a successor's been chosen.
And in other news, former FIFA President Sepp Blatter and former UEFA President Michel Platini have been acquitted of corruption by a Swiss court. The pair had stood trial over a payment in 2011 of £1.7 million made by Blatter, the head of FIFA at the time, to Platini, who ran UEFA. Both men had denied wrongdoing and said the transfer was belated payment for Platini's advisory work for FIFA. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's over to Mercy and Bev with To The Point.
A very good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner. We're on your TV, radio and online, and here's what's coming up.
Yesterday, of course, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced, after a lot of pressure, that he's going to step down. So what happens next and who are the favourites to succeed him? We're going to be digging into all of that for you over the next couple of hours.
Yes, and as we've been hearing this morning, former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been shot and has now sadly passed away. We'll be giving you all the updates on this tragic event as they come in.
And back here at home, what impact will Prime Minister Johnson resigning have on Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland Protocol? We'll be talking to the former First Minister of Northern Ireland, Arlene Foster.
Yes, that's all coming up and much more as well across the programme. We're here with you until midday as usual, and you can get in touch with your views at gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, our top story, unsurprisingly, Prime Minister Boris Johnson yesterday, of course, resigned as leader of the Conservative Party, saying that he fought to remain in power as he felt it was his duty, but finally had to step down, as was, quote, the will of his party.
His decision follows 3 days of revolt from within his own party that saw almost 60 MPs, including 5 cabinet ministers, quit.
As well, however, the Prime Minister is set to continue in the role he describes as, quote, the best job in the world until a successor is chosen. I believe he's not currently the leader of the Conservative Party, but obviously he's still the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
I think that's how it works, isn't it?
Yeah. So why did so many previously supportive Tory MPs change their minds and backed the ousting of Prime Minister Boris Johnson from office? Our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, sent us this report.
The straw that broke Boris Johnson's back began on the 29th of June here at this private members' Tory club in central London. What happened here and how the PM dealt with it was the final nail in the coffin for his premiership.
2 days later, on the 1st of July, a story is printed alleging Tory Tamworth MP Chris Pincher was drunkenly groping men at the Carlton Club. He resigns as Deputy Chief Whip, saying he embarrassed himself after drinking too much, but denies the other allegations.
The same day, Number 10 says the PM wasn't aware of specific allegations against Chris Pincher. But later that day, Parliament's watchdog receives a complaint against Chris Pincher and the whip is withdrawn from him. In other words, he now sits as an independent MP.
On July the 3rd and 4th, 2 ministers both publicly say the PM didn't know about any specific allegations against Chris Pincher before making him Deputy Chief Whip in February. Then later on July the 4th, the line from Number 10 shifts. The Prime Minister was aware of some allegations.
On July the 5th, Dominic Raab admits that Chris Pincher was investigated in 2019 over alleged inappropriate behaviour while he was a minister here at the Foreign Office.
Half an hour later, former chief diplomat Simon MacDonald publishes a letter alleging Boris Johnson did know about the 2019 investigation and warning Number 10 it needs to come clean.
4.5 hours later, it did.
The Prime Minister did not immediately recall the conversation in late 2019 about this incident.
6 hours later came this.
You know, if I had my time again, I would think back on it and recognise that he wasn't going to learn any lesson, and he wasn't going to change.
2 minutes later, his health secretary resigns. 7 minutes later, his chancellor. By 9:30am on Thursday, 59 members of the government had resigned. Boris Johnson then quit, making him number 60.
The herd instinct is powerful. When the herd moves, it moves. And my friends, in politics, no one is remotely indispensable.
Operation Save Big Dog had failed. Paul Hawkins, GB News.
OK, for more, let's turn to GB News' political correspondent Tom Harwood, live in Downing Street. Tom, you've had a busy few days. Which Tories are looking to move into the House behind you as we all wake up this morning?
Yes, gosh, it has been an incredibly busy few days, and there's an eerie calm on the street today after the chaos of yesterday. Still the world's media out here alongside us, but I have to say the temperature has cooled somewhat. Everyone's looking now to the future, not the immediate future, but what is to take place in the next weeks and indeed months, as this leadership contest may not conclude until September. There are some names, however, who are doing the rounds. The Foreign Secretary, of course, flew back from Indonesia. That's Liz Truss. She is widely expected to be consulting about starting her standing to be Prime Minister. Nadhim Zahawi, of course, recently appointed Chancellor. His odds have shot up really quite considerably, and his campaign team, I've tried to contact some of the people who are around him, and they have been pretty incommunicado for the last few hours. There's also, of course, Rishi Sunak, who has been long suspected of organising a campaign for quite some time, resigning, of course, just minutes after another potential contender, Sajid Javid, at the start of this week. Sajid Javid clearly doing the rounds, putting his pitch in terms of his character, morality, and everything that stemmed from his resignation that really kicked off the events of this week. There are other contenders as well, perhaps less at the front of the pack, and the reason why maybe Tom Tugendhat and Jeremy Hunt have been early off the blocks is because they will need to work harder, having in one case not been in cabinet, in the other case not been in cabinet for quite some time. Perhaps one of the reasons why we're seeing some names that are the bookies favour less declaring earlier is because they need to build up that sort of support. But of course, all of this is relatively intellectual until we get the terms of this leadership election. We're expecting the 1922 committee to announce the plan in terms of how this election will take place, how long it will last, and the precise mechanism by which MPs may be nominated. Last time round, it was 10 MPs. Each MP needed to get nominated to get onto that ballot paper before it's whittled down to the final two. We're hearing it may be the threshold raised a little bit this time, but of course the amount of time given to this is crucial. Speaking to a lot of Tory MPs, they don't want to repeat what many see as perhaps mistakes of the past, rushing into a new leader who will become, of course, not just the leader of the party, but the Prime Minister too, might not be what the country needs right now. This needs to be a methodical process. So we'll see what that process looks like at the start of next week.
Well, Tom, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll be throwing to you throughout the day, of course. Who knows what might happen today. Now, we're delighted to be joined in the studio this hour by Sam Lister, Deputy Political Editor of the Daily Express. She's going to be joining us over the next hour. Thank you so much for coming in. What do you think Boris is thinking this morning? Is he waking up thinking, I've really effed it up, shall we say? Or actually is he thinking, phew, thank God for that, I can go off and earn a lot of money now? and forget about this episode?
I don't think he's a man who looks backwards. He will be looking to what happens next. He's not going to sit there and self-reflect about where things could have been different or how he could have done things differently. I think he will just be looking to the future now, and he will trying to be, I mean, clearly he's going to be able to make millions. He's going to have a great career outside, talking to people like you, writing his book. I mean, it's going to be the best political autobiography in history, isn't it? We've got an actual journalist writing their own book that's going to be on the horizon, and we'll all be looking forward to that, because it's bound to be more interesting than, say, David Cameron's was, which was very, very circumspect. So I don't think he will be looking backwards. He'll be OK, I think. OK,
and who will be looking forwards then in the Tory party? Because obviously many will have their eye on that number 10 door, won't they?
Yeah.
Who do you think has a likelihood of actually having a chance to be the next Tory leader?
Well, we've got about a dozen who we think are going to try and put themselves forward, but really often, as we've seen with Conservative leadership contests in the past, it's very rarely the favourite that actually makes it through. And you have to remember with the Conservative Party, there are quite a lot of people who don't like each other. There's quite a lot of rival factions. And so often with this contest, it is a case of who do they dislike the least, rather than who is the one that they choose to get behind the most. It's who is most acceptable to us, because we dislike them the least. They've done the least to upset us. So that's often why you have these outsiders coming through the middle.
Do we know yet, Sam, or do you think the Conservative Party will take a risk on the members being allowed to vote in terms of narrowing it down?
I think it would be a mistake if they just tried to sort this out within the party. We've got 2 and a bit weeks till they break up for the summer recess. And I think the expectation is that the MPs will have chosen their favourite 2 candidates by then, and that will go to the grassroots. There are some suggestions that they will bypass that process, leave the grassroots out of this. I think that would cause a lot of anger in the party and concern in the country. So I think they'd be foolish to do that.
And Tory party grassroots members that I've spoken to will feel very aggrieved. They're almost kind of given up on the idea that they will be given a chance to narrow it down. But I don't think they're going to be happy if they are marginalised in that way in terms of this process. Brexit hangs heavy over this decision, doesn't it? And whether we end up being taken back into the EU by proxy or by actuality. Can you think of the potential Conservative leaders and Prime Ministers who would be more likely to take us in that direction? Tom Tugendhat, I'm guessing, is one of them?
Well, Tom Tugendhat, clearly, he is of the kind of softer side of the party. He is a Remainer. You know, he has distanced himself from demands to go back into the single market, and that was clearly a decision taken to enhance his chances of winning this contest. But I think if the grassroots get anywhere near this contest, they are not going to be putting a Remainer in charge of this.
That's right.
Party in the country.
And that's why I think it's interesting, because I think Ben Wallace has almost become accepted as the de facto replacement for Boris Johnson at the moment, given he's polling so well with Conservative supporters. He was a Remainer, albeit he did accept the result of the referendum and say, look, we need to move forward now that we've lost. He's lost, his side lost. How do you think that's going to play in the general public?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, Ben Wallace wasn't actually just a Remainer. He was the man who was at Boris Johnson's side trying to persuade him to back Remain. And Boris Johnson obviously did not take that advice and went his own way. But clearly they were very close pals, discussed everything. And he was very, very much in the camp of trying to make Boris Johnson be a Remainer and a voice for Remain. I think I'm not actually convinced that Ben Wallace is going to put himself forward.
Yeah, he hasn't officially thrown his hat in the ring yet, has he?
That would throw a real spanner into the works, wouldn't it, though? Because he has been...
He's the party membership faithful. They adore him. He consistently polls very, very high with the Conservative members. They like him. He ticks all the boxes. He's the Venn diagram, isn't he? He's the middle-class, middle-aged, ex-military white man.
Indeed. He's had
nothing wrong with all of the above. Yeah. But what I'm saying is he looks like a Prime Minister.
He does, and he's had a good war, and he's had... actually praise from all sides of the House. So he's very popular. He's polling incredibly well at the moment in terms of the grassroots. But I think you've got to have the stomach for this. You've got to have the stomach. It's not everybody does want that top job. It comes with an enormous amount of scrutiny. It's incredibly lonely. And actually, not everybody wants to put themselves through that.
And they might not want to put themselves through it now, Sam. That's the point, isn't it? Who wants to become Prime Minister under these sort of circumstances?
There's only bad things coming down the line. The cost of living crisis, the war in Ukraine is not showing any signs of abating. You know, whoever takes on this job has got an awful lot of work to do, and there's not going to be any kind of nice handouts, is there, and happy things to do. It's all misery down the line, I'm afraid.
And I tell you, the frustration, I think, particularly for somebody like me who was very much questioning lockdowns and the sanity of the policy decisions of the last 2 years, to see the mess that we've been left in, our teenagers, our finances, our businesses. And it feels like now that they're all kind of running away, not here to deal with the consequences of it. That makes me a little bit cross. Anyway.
Well, Sam, thank you, and we'll speak to you again very shortly. Now, after the break, who could be our next Prime Minister? And indeed, who do you want to be the next Prime Minister? Who would you like to see at the next general election representing the Conservatives, or Labour, in fact? We'll get out of London and ask how the voters feel very shortly. But first, the weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to Friday's forecast. Plenty of sunshine to come across the UK today. However, we could see some thicker cloud, patchy light rain across the far northwest. And the reason for this is a weak weather front sits across parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, under this big area of high pressure. So most places will be dry and settled, but just a little bit more cloud for one or two of us. First thing Friday morning, the best of the sunshine across eastern and southern England. Thicker cloud across parts of Wales, the West Midlands, northwest England will disperse as the morning goes on. However, across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, bit of a grey morning here, the risk of some light rain and drizzle. But this weather front just slowly pushes a little bit further south through the afternoon, allowing it to brighten up across Scotland. Temperatures across the board 20 to 25 Celsius, but in the southeast 28, possibly 29 degrees. So a warm evening to come across much of the UK. Plenty of sunshine ahead of dusk across England and Wales. Thicker cloud pushing from Northern Ireland into northwest England, North Wales. Perhaps the odd spot of drizzle, but many places dry during the early hours into Saturday morning. Just one or two showers across Scotland, but overall another mild night. Temperatures 13 to 15 Celsius to start Saturday morning, but plenty of dry weather, plenty of sunshine to get going. A bit more cloud across western areas, but this dispersing as the morning goes on. Blue skies for many as we move through the day. However, another weak weather front will move into parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, perhaps thick enough for a bit of drizzle, but elsewhere, lots of sunshine, high UV levels and high temperatures as well, 27 Celsius towards the southeast. And this continues over the next few days. Plenty of sunshine, lots of dry weather and temperatures rising further. We could see the high 20s by Sunday and even up to 30 or 31 as we head towards Monday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well.
I feel like I could take on the world.
Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, it's 10:24. This is To The Point with me, Bev Turner and Mercy Muroki on GB News. We are live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, well, as we've been discussing, the race to succeed Boris Johnson has well and truly started this morning. Our reporters Ed Crawford and Will Hollis are out and about in the constituencies of possible contenders. Let's start with our East of England reporter, Ed Crawford. Where are you, and which MP where you are is trying to oust Boris Johnson, get in his old house?
Hi, well, I am in Thetford in south-west Norfolk, and this is Liz Truss constituency. Now, I've been going around speaking to people here today to find out, do you think Liz Truss would be a good PM? Now, we know Liz Truss is popular within the party, but does that popularity transcend down to the people on the street? And from the people I've spoken to today, that is certainly not the case. Several people remarked to me that Liz Truss has put great effort in revamping her public image. If you look at Mrs. Truss's Instagram account, it's full of very wholesome images. She's also taken great efforts to encourage these images of her in a Margaret Thatcher-esque ability. But a lot of people are saying to me that that's almost a bit crass, and it seems that she just jumps on any PR opportunity going. People here say that she's been an okay MP, but they don't really see her as PM material.
OK, thank you, Ed. That is interesting. OK, we're going to go to Will now. He is in Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi's constituency. Zahawi was, of course, appointed Chancellor on Tuesday, but yesterday morning called on the Prime Minister to go. Good morning, Will. What are people saying in Stratford-upon-Avon?
Good morning. Yes, Stratford-upon-Avon, Warwickshire, Shakespeare's hometown, Shakespeare's home county. Lots of people around here moving around, enjoying the bright and beautiful day, enjoying the Shakespearean sights. Lots of people also considering, certainly local people, whether their MP, Nadhim Zahawi, might be the next Prime Minister. It's been a big week for Nadhim when Sajid Javid resigned from his position as the Chancellor. It was Nadhim Zahawi who took that position less than 48 hours later. During that big period that we had, where we saw around 50 to 60 resignations, only 48 hours later, Nadhim Zahawi was encouraging the Prime Minister to go. Now, who he is as a constituency MP, well, he's certainly very popular, at least in terms of votes, or at least the Conservative Party in Stratford-upon-Avon are very popular. They got 60% of the votes in the last election. He's been here since 2010. In terms of who he is as a person and his origins, he's from Kurdish background, from Baghdad. He had to flee persecution. One of the things that he says, or people around here certainly say, is that he's a self-made millionaire. One of the local journalists that I just spoke to a few minutes ago off of camera said that people around here think he's a careerist, and whether he is fit to be the Prime Minister or if he should just stay as a local MP is something that we're going to see in the near future.
Super. Thank you very much, Will. I'm going to ask you, Sam, Nadhim Zahawi. Where does he sit in your ranking of who would be a fantastic Conservative Prime Minister?
Well, I've been tipping him privately for a while because I thought he was clearly a man who could attract people from different parts of the party. But I think his 24-hour of chaos in his job as Chancellor, he took the job of Chancellor, obviously, when most people were leaving. You could say, I'm doing that for the good of the country. But then within 24 hours, he was telling Boris Johnson to go, and it just didn't really make any sense. He will have to get over that hurdle. But I think he is very personable. He's got a lot of support in the party. And I think, the fact that he's a self-made man, he came from, obviously, we've heard his background. He came over here as a refugee and made a good, solid business there. So that's all to his credit in the Conservative Party.
Yeah, I think that point's interesting because actually Nadhim Zahawi, he's not the typical sort of Oxbridge-educated, was born into wealth type Prime Minister. The three previous Prime Ministers, Conservative Prime Ministers, have all come from Oxford, of course, and they've very much been made from that cloth, cut from that cloth. Could the fact Nadhim was an immigrant, he was a child refugee, do you think him selling the story of, look, this is new Britain, we need to embrace Britain, but also have conservative values, the left don't have a monopoly on sort of talking about immigrants and what immigration means. will that cut through to voters, or actually do you think the personal background thing doesn't really matter here?
I think having a good story to tell is important, and I think actually when I was speaking to MPs yesterday, one said to me, we don't want another public school boy. We've been there, we've done that a number of times. It's getting us nowhere. They want somebody who has had a more normal life, who's actually made a good life for themselves and has got a good story to tell. So I think it is important, but it's not everything, is it? You have to have the substance there. You've got to have a vision. You've got to be able to tell that vision to your.
See, I can't ever forgive him for standing up and saying he had no intention of implementing vaccine COVID passports whilst the contracts were being tendered in the background.
And I think that there's certainly a group of people who will absolutely feel like that. Yeah. But also, I think there are people who think that actually, as vaccines minister, he actually delivered something. He's got a track record. He can say, I've delivered things. He actually got schools back on track after all the mess during COVID with school closures. So I think he can say, look, I've actually done things in government. I've got a track record of delivery, and that's quite important too.
He's one of the richest men in Westminster, and I don't think during a cost of living crisis the public are going to warm to that at all. He's a multi-millionaire.
But so is
I know they are. I know
so many of them.
I know. But I think that might explain some of the indifference this cabinet have seemed to have demonstrated over the last 3 months in terms of not implementing tax cuts and not helping people. Maybe they just can't relate. I mean, he's got a fabulous story. How marvellous that he can arrive here and become a self-made man. Great. That's wonderful. Capitalism works. Fabulous. But then what do you do with that power? You get that power. You've got to help people. And I don't feel like any of this lot have.
And I think, actually, we saw with Rishi Sunak, everybody knew he was stratospherically wealthy, beyond the levels that any of us can dream of. Everybody knew that, and it was all fine while he was giving money out during the COVID pandemic. As soon as you start taking that off during a cost of living crisis, then that becomes an issue.
Absolutely. OK, thank you, Sam. Sam Lister, Deputy Political Editor of The Express, is with us for this hour. What do you make of all of this? I think we got time for a couple of views now.
Yes, we have. Benita says Jeremy Hunt would be the worst possible choice for Prime Minister. She's appalled at the way Boris Johnson has been treated, and as a lifetime Conservative, she says, I'm seriously considering if I can ever vote for them again.
Yep. Morning, guys, says Jason. Thank you for emailing in, Jason. I'm very much hoping that Suella Braverman, it's Braverman, not Braverman. I mean, she needs to be a braver man to take this on, right? But I think it's Braverman. Gets the top job. She would be the perfect choice. She's a Brexiteer and she's anti-woke. Yes, she's got that clip of her saying, I'm basically, I am anti-woke. I mean, I'd like to know what she genuinely means by that. I think that's a phrase which is open to interpretation.
Yeah, I was speaking to I don't even know who's in the cabinet anymore, to be honest. I've lost count. But a minister, and he did not think at all that the anti-woke thing is going to be important.
No, I don't think it is.
I think cultural issues are very important for so many people in these sort of working class communities who still very much resonate with the sense of Britishness, who are concerned that might be eroded, who are concerned with lots of ideology sort of trying to chip away at that sense.
Maybe, yeah. I think so, if you're going to come out and say I'm anti-woke, you have to very clearly define what you mean by that. But anyway, that's what we do here. After the break, what impact will Prime Minister Johnson resigning have on the Northern Ireland Protocol? But before that, a look at this morning's news.
Good morning, it's 10:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has died after being shot at a campaign event. It's understood Japan's longest-serving leader was shot from behind while giving a speech in the western city of Nara. A doctor at the hospital where he was taken says he bled to death from 2 deep wounds, one in his neck and one in his heart. Police say a 41-year-old man suspected of carrying out the shooting has been arrested. The race for who's going to replace Boris Johnson as Prime Minister following his resignation yesterday as leader of the Conservative Party has begun. With no clear frontrunner, around a dozen potential candidates are assessing whether they have the support to mount leadership bids. Tom Tugendhat, the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee chairman, has become the first contender to throw his hat in the ring. It's believed former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and ex-Health Secretary Sajid Javid could also be considering the job. Meanwhile, there's growing pressure on Boris Johnson to step down immediately rather than wait for a new leader. Former Prime Minister Sir John Major's backing is among those backing Deputy PM Dominic Raab to take over in the interim. But Downing Street says Mr Johnson feels a strong sense of duty to stay on. Former FIFA President Sepp Blatter and ex-UEFA President Michel Platini have been acquitted of corruption by a Swiss court. The pair had stood trial over a payment in 2011 of £1.7 million made by Blatter, the head of FIFA at the time, to Platini, who ran UEFA. Both men had denied wrongdoing and said the transfer was belated payment for Platini's advisory work for FIFA. And excitement's building for British tennis fans today as Cameron Norrie gets ready for the biggest match of his career in the men's semi-finals at Wimbledon. The 26-year-old's only the fourth British man to reach the last four at the All England club. It's a tough one, though. He'll play top seed Novak Djokovic on centre court this afternoon. And good luck to Cameron Norrie. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy $1.193 and 1.18 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,455 and 8 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. It's 10:38 and this is To The Point with Bev Turner and me, Mercy Moroki, on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio.
Now, former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has died after being shot at a campaign event. Abe was a well-respected world leader. He was Prime Minister twice between 2006 and 2007, and then again 2012 to 2020. He headed Japan's bid for the 2020 Olympics, famously dressing up as Super Mario at the closing ceremony in Rio. Our Prime Minister Boris Johnson has tweeted incredibly sad news about Shinzo Abe. His global leadership through uncharted times will be remembered by many. My thoughts are with his family, friends and the Japanese people. The UK stands with you at this dark and sad time.
Yes, well, joining us now in the studio to discuss this further is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, just explain to us how this incident happened.
Well, Shinzo Abe had been giving a stump speech for a political friend
in the southern city of Nara. He was halfway through a speech when shots rang out. The suspect, we're told, had come up behind Shinzo Abe and got really within a few feet of him, opened fire with what you can see on the ground, which looks to be a homemade shotgun-type device. There will be inevitable questions about how he was able to get as close to the former Prime Minister. That's the suspect there being tackled by security teams. There was a security detail around Shinzo Abe, as you would expect. He was a former Prime Minister, still a very high-profile figure and a leading light within the Liberal Democrat Party in Japan. So it's still very much at the heart of politics, even though he had retired as Prime Minister because of ill health a couple of years back. But the longest-serving Prime Minister in Japan, so a very well-known figure, not just in Japan, but in this country as well.
And well-liked and popular.
Yes, he was incredibly well-liked. I think his policies were quite hawkish on issues around Japan's security. Interestingly, this suspect, who is in police custody now, we're told by the national broadcaster NHK, was a former member of the Japanese Defence Forces, a member of the Navy. You saw there shots of Shinzo Abe being taken from that helicopter that airlifted him to hospital. We're told by doctors who've just given a news conference that they worked on him for 4.5 hours to try to save his life. He'd gone into cardiopulmonary arrest. They'd given him 100 units of blood during those 4.5 hours, but they just couldn't stop the bleeding.
And Japan has such low crime.
And
very little gun use, presumably.
That's one of the most shocking aspects of this. It does have a very low gun crime rate. On any given year, there's half a dozen people who are fatally wounded in gun incidents. Now, compare that to 35,000 or so in the United States on an average year. So you can see it is a country with very low levels of gun crime. You need... it's pretty much illegal to have a handgun. There are great kind of checks that you have to go through for any other types of weapons, shotguns and the like. But it seems, from what we could see with the shot that we played just now, that this appears to have been a homemade device put together by duct tape, a couple of pipes, and clearly it's been enough to be a lethal weapon. The doctors who were carrying out the surgery on Shinzo Abe say that the bullets had gone deep enough to penetrate the heart. They weren't able to find the bullets actually during the surgery. But as I say, despite 4.5 hours of battling to save this man's life, he has sadly died. And there's great shock, of course, all around the world now from political leaders that have worked with him, including the likes of David Cameron, who considers him a friend and said he was absolutely appalled at this tragic incident.
OK, thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. OK.
Isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I'm sure world leaders the condolences will be pouring in all day long from world leaders. Now let's move to something closer to home, the Northern Ireland Protocol, and disagreements with the European Union over the implementation of it has been a key sticking point for the British government. And there are now concerns that with Boris Johnson's resignation, there could be a weakening of the government's stance on the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Now, many unionists in Northern Ireland will want to avoid what they see as the de facto implementation of a sea border between Great Britain and the island of Ireland if the protocol remains unchanged.
As well, who better to talk to about Boris's departure and how it's been seen in Northern Ireland than Arlene Foster, Dame Arlene Foster, former First Minister of Northern Ireland and, of course, GB News presenter. Thanks for joining us. Look, this was, I suppose, inevitable this week, Boris Johnson's resignation. But the question is, who would you now like to see replacing Boris Johnson, who would give you confidence when it comes to dealing with this Northern Ireland Protocol issue?
Well, good morning, Mercy. Good morning, Beverly. First of all, can I say how shocked I was to hear about that dreadful shooting in Japan? Shinzo Abe came to Northern Ireland. He came to my home county in Enniskillen for the G8 back in 2013. So many will be shocked here in Northern Ireland to hear what has happened with that dreadful shooting today. Obviously, Operation Big Dog is now over, and Boris is stepping down as Prime Minister. He made many mistakes, not least around the Northern Ireland Protocol, but had recognised the difficulties that were associated with it and was trying to fix that through the legislation in Parliament. It is so important that that legislation continues, and whoever is in the position of leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister must continue with that, because of course the Conservative Party is not just the Conservative Party, it is the Conservative and Unionist Party, and really for any Prime Minister of that party to allow a border to exist between the different parts of the United Kingdom would just be unheard of.
Yeah, I just wondered, does it make a difference to you whether the person who replaces Boris Johnson was somebody who was a Remainer or somebody who was a Brexiteer? How do you feel about the prospect of perhaps getting somebody who was an ardent Remainer, and how that might change the landscape when it comes to negotiating with the EU?
Well, I think what we need is someone who understands that we're dealing with the whole of the UK and not just parts of the UK. Obviously, we had a Remainer Prime Minister with Theresa May, and it was she who made a mess of the negotiations and indeed laid the foundations for the protocol back in 2017. We're still dealing with the fact that she didn't understand, or she misrepresented the Belfast Agreement to the European negotiators, and we are living with the consequences of that. So I hope whoever is the new leader and new Prime Minister will understand the Belfast Agreement. It should be in their first day brief, and they shouldn't just take what their officials tell them is in the document, but what is actually in the document, and they should read into that very, very carefully.
I was just reading online, Arlene, the piece that you wrote for The Express, which has just gone up, and in it you say the Remainer establishment never forgave Boris for Brexit, and their celebration as the Prime Minister stepped down was unseemly and ill-mannered, to say the least. When Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, was leader of the Conservative, still is Prime Minister, was leader of the Conservative Party, this has been a moving picture for you, and it must have been incredibly frustrating. Do you feel now you're on the edge of finding some sort of solution with whoever is the new Prime Minister? And you must have your money on somebody that you think would do the bidding that you want, Arlene. Give us a name.
I don't think anybody does my bidding anymore, Beverly. It's long past that. But I mean, I have to say, gosh, I don't want to damage this individual, because I think he's done a brilliant job in his current role. I think Ben Wallace is a tremendous person. I think he has got on with his job as Defence Ministry. He hasn't been involved in any of the drama around the Prime Minister, or indeed trying to replace him. There are many who have a lot of ambitions, but I'm concerned that their ability doesn't match their ambitions. I do think that Ben would be a good call, and I hope that he seriously considers putting his name forward. But of course, at the end of the day, it is always a matter for the individual and their family whether they step forward, because we can see the pressure, the stress, all of the what comes with being the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. It is a world position, and it is a very big call. There's many who will step forward who won't be fit for the job, but I hope that those who really are able to do the job really consider them moving forward and coming. And
who do you really not want, Arlene Foster? You're not a woman to mince your words. Come on. We're going to hear a lot of politicians hedging their bets at the moment, but I like to think you're a straight talker. Who would you wake up if it's announced who the leader is? Who are you going to have your head in your hands going, this is not going to end well for us?
Well, I just think we have to wait to see who's on the ticket, because there are so many people coming out now and saying that they want to be Prime Minister and they want to lead the party. I have to say I would be concerned if Rishi Sunak was the Prime Minister, because he has been someone who has shown that he doesn't really have an understanding of Northern Ireland. We understand that he was one of the people who didn't want to have to deal with the protocol. Therefore, I would be concerned if he was someone who was leading the country. But we'll wait to see who's on the ticket, and I promise, Beverly, I'll come back to Mercy and whoever is with her at the time when I see the full list and give you my opinions on all of them.
Well, we'll hold you to that. We'll hold you to that. Thank you, Dame Arlene Foster, for joining us. And of course, you can catch her on GB News here, which is also GB News presenter. We're very lucky to have her. Now, we'll be no doubt hearing soon from all those different Tory leadership candidates, giving their pitches to the country and, more crucially, really, to the membership of the Conservative Party, who, of course, have their fate in their hands.
That's right, but is there a clear favourite? Bookies Ladbrokes had Defence Secretary Ben Wallace ahead at 3-1, followed by former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt. We haven't talked about her much yet.
No, well, do these odds give a reliable indication of who could be our next PM? That's the big question, really. And what are the issues that matter most to members of the Tory party and the country as a whole? Let's speak to Martin Baxter, who's CEO of Electoral Calculus Political Polling. Thank you for joining us this morning. Look, we've mentioned there that Ben Wallace seems to be very much a favourite at the moment. And indeed, we just heard from Dame Arlene Foster there saying she would very much have faith in Ben Wallace if he did take over. Do you think Ben Wallace is somebody who has cut through in the general population from what you've seen in your polling?
I think that's a good question. Everybody at the moment is wondering what's going to happen in this race. It's early days and nothing is certain. But what we've done to give an idea is to take actually a mixture of 3 different measures to look at the popularity of candidates amongst Conservative voters, also amongst Conservative members, and as you were already looking at, what the betting markets are saying. So we took an average of those 3, and actually 2 names came out at the top, almost dead level, was Rishi Sunak and Ben Wallace. Are there with about 15% each, and behind them is Liz Truss and Penny Mordaunt, also about dead equal amongst themselves, between themselves for third place. So that's what the figures are looking like, and within that there's a mixture. Ben Wallace, as you said, is quite popular with the bookies and with members, but much less well known with voters. He's a relatively new face on the scene there. Rishi Sunak, on the other hand, is much more well known with the voters. He's been Chancellor of the Exchequer for some years, spent a lot of money in the COVID crisis. And although he's less popular with the membership, he's more popular with the voters. And of course, during the process, both MPs and the members are going to have an eye on somebody who can actually win the next election, because Boris Johnson did win an election big time. And they don't want to make the mistake of picking, say, somebody like Theresa May, who's unable to connect with the public and is not going to lead them to, a potentially good result at the next general election.
Martin, one of the names which our viewers have got in touch with to say, what about Priti Patel in the numbers, please? She'd make a fantastic PM, says Stephanie. I haven't seen Priti Patel's name mentioned at all yet in the running. She's not officially, I don't think, said that she would like to be part of the succession contest.
No, she didn't show up on the poll of Conservative members that sort of Home did, and she's not ranking on the betting markets. Just have a quick look there. So I'm sure she's had a high-profile career, but she's not showing up on the measures at the moment. So an outside candidate if she chooses to throw her hat in the ring.
Yeah, maybe she's tainted by how botched the Rwanda plan has been so far. That might not work in her favour. Just one final question. In terms of issues rather than candidates, what is at the top of the list for voters at the moment?
Well, I think the economy is one of the big issues at the moment. It's ahead of health and immigration in what voters say they care about. So Rishi Sunak's potentially well placed there. On the other hand, he was a bit torn under the Boris Johnson government, that he talked the talk of sort of free market, right-wing economics, but delivered the highest taxes that the country's had in some time. Liz Truss has been trying to position herself as more of a kind of right-wing Thatcherite true blue candidate, so she may have some traction there. Ben Wallace, I'd say less clear what his economic plans are, and that's maybe something he'd need to develop as the campaign progresses. So I'd say economy is the big issue, and I think candidates are going to have answers on that.
Thank you very much, Martin. Martin Baxter, CEO of Electoral Calculus Political Polling. What a time to be a political poller at the moment, or a political editor of a daily newspaper. We've got Sam Lister here with us still. We haven't talked very much about Jeremy Hunt at the moment. Former cabinet heavy hitter, absolutely in lockstep with the globalists. He's got a lot of Chinese backing. We better perfect our Mandarin if Jeremy Hunt gets in as Prime Minister, shouldn't we? Don't you think, Sam?
Well, I think he hasn't made it clear yet whether he's going to throw his hat in the ring.
Oh, he so will.
But he, over the last few weeks, he's been making little, kind of flirtations with the Brexiteer wing of the party. I fear it's far too little, far too late to make any headway into that gang. You might see a kind of Jeremy Hunt, Tom Tugendhat ticket where they run on a kind of joint ticket. That would be quite an interesting centrist approach from those two. I could see that happening. But I think Jeremy Hunt, we saw what happened last time when he went to the grassroots. He only got a third of the votes against Boris Johnson. I don't think the grassroots are going to change their mind on him because ultimately he's still very, very kind of centrist Remainer type of Conservative, and that's not what they're looking for.
We've mentioned Liz Truss, but let's talk about the women for a minute. Penny Mordaunt, impressive character, good at the dispatches box.
Yeah.
A lot of people will know from Splash, the Channel 4 series, where she wore a swimsuit a few years ago and did that diving competition. Yeah. She has probably put a little nail in her coffin with some of the key Conservative voters when she stood up and said a trans man can be a man and a trans woman can be a woman. The media will love that. The newspapers will love that. But I'm not sure the Conservative voters are in the mood for that sort of mindset.
She will get asked that question, and this will be a question that actually most candidates will get asked because people want to know, can you answer that question? We saw the trouble Keir Starmer got into when he's asked this question. So it will be an issue throughout the contest, whether that is at this first stage with the MPs or at the second stage that we expect to happen with the grassroots. It will be an issue. But she is an absolute leading Brexiteer. She was right there at the forefront of the campaign. That's definitely part of her advantage in this. She's kind of kept just quietly under the radar in government, just getting on with the job. She hasn't caused any major ructions. So I think she has a very good chance. She's quite popular in the polls.
Yeah.
So.
OK.
Well, it's been great having you. Thank you so much for joining us. Over the next hour, please join us again. We're going to be back for another hour very shortly, but here's your weather and a short break.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Plenty of warm summer sunshine for the vast majority, not just today, but for the next week or so. There's always an exception, and it will be cloudier at times in the north through the rest of the day as a weak weather front sinks south around the top of an area of high pressure, which will increasingly drive our weather heading into the weekend. So with that high pressure, actually a lot of sunshine for England, Wales, for northern and eastern Scotland as well. I think southwest Scotland, parts of northwest England, Northern Ireland, we'll see that thicker cloud at times and perhaps a few spots of rain and drizzle, mostly towards the likes of Dumfries and Galloway. So a bit cooler here, 20 Celsius, but otherwise mid to high 20s for many, peaking at 29 degrees there towards the southeast. And then the area of cloud that I mentioned, that sinks slowly southwards and tends to fizzle out. A few showers will turn up for the far north of Scotland overnight, along with a keen breeze. And with clouds sinking south into Wales and the Midlands, well, that will keep temperatures up in the teens. But even where we get clear spells, it's a relatively mild night, 12 or 13 Celsius the low as we start off the weekend. So a cloudier spell for Northern Ireland, for parts of northern Scotland, as well as, at first, Wales and southern England. By lunchtime, however, that cloud disappears, and for many, yet again, it's a blue skies day for much of England, Wales, southern Scotland. Plenty of sunshine. 21 Celsius for Glasgow, 27 for London. But for the north of Scotland, here it will be cloudier. There'll be some showery rain in the far north of the mainland, as well as Orkney and Lewis, and I think that rain will make it feel a bit cooler. However, that rain in the far north is where it stays really for the rest of the weekend, because for the vast majority, that high pressure keeps things fine with plenty of sunshine continuing into next week, and it will turn even hotter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock and this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner on your TV, radio and online. We're with you until midday, so for another hour with all the biggest day's news, expert guests and our opinions, as well as yours.
OK, make sure you get in touch with your views. You've been sending them in. They are flooding in, as usual. gbviews at gbnews.uk. We'll be going to as many of those as we can throughout the show. But first of all, here are your very important, very latest news headlines.
Good morning, it's just coming up to 1 minute past 11. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has died after being shot at a campaign event. He was giving a speech in the western city of Nara when he was shot from behind. He later died in hospital. A doctor there says he bled to death from 2 deep wounds, one to his heart and one to his neck. Police say a 41-year-old suspect has been arrested. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has paid tribute to Abe, saying his global leadership through uncharted times will be remembered by many. And as you can see, the current Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is addressing the country right now, and we'll bring you more on that as we get it. Back here, the race for who's going to replace Boris Johnson as Prime Minister following his resignation yesterday as leader of the Conservative Party has begun. With no clear front-runner, around a dozen potential candidates are assessing whether they have the support to mount leadership bids. Tom Tugendhat, the Foreign Affairs Committee chairman, has become the first contender to throw his hat in the ring. It's believed former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and ex-Health Secretary Sajid Javid could also be considering the job. But Labour's Shadow Trade Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds told GB News there should be a general election.
What we should actually be having is a fresh start, a change of government. Changing the person at the top is not going to change the fundamental issue for the Conservative Party, which is this 12 years of failure. And there's no point it's somehow trying to distance themselves from Boris Johnson. They made Boris Johnson possible. They've made the last months of trashing of standards in public life, the lying and the chaos all possible. And whoever is at the top of the Conservative Party is not going to change that.
Meanwhile, there's growing pressure on Boris Johnson to step down immediately rather than wait for a new leader. Former Prime Minister Sir John Major is among those backing Deputy PM Dominic Raab to take over in the interim. But Downing Street said Mr Johnson feels a strong sense of duty to stay on. Yesterday's address to the nation came after a slew of resignations and a cabinet reshuffle, which saw a number of key ministers replaced. New Education Secretary James Cleverly's told GB News he'll wait until he sees the full slate before deciding who he supports.
Personal circumstances mean that I won't be putting myself forward, but I'm also confident that we have a pool of talent which will enable us to choose someone with fantastic experience, whoever that might be. And once a successor has been chosen, the Prime Minister will stand down and hand over. And I think that is the most, I think that's the most pragmatic, professional and least disruptive way of doing it.
Well, MP for Shipley Philip Davies told GB News he sees no reason why Boris Johnson should step down before a successor's found.
I don't understand this idea that he should have to step down straight away. When Theresa May resigned in similar circumstances, she carried on, and nobody batted an eyelid about that. When David Cameron resigned, he carried on until we'd found a successor, and nobody batted an eyelid about that either. I mean, that's what always happens, is that the current Prime Minister and the current leader stays on until a successor's been chosen.
In other news, former FIFA President Sepp Blatter and ex-UEFA President Michel Platini have been acquitted of corruption by a Swiss court. The pair had stood trial over a payment in 2011 of £1.7 million made by Blatter, the head of FIFA at the time, to Platini, who ran UEFA. Both men had denied wrongdoing and said the transfer was belated payment for Platini's advisory work for FIFA. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, let's return to Mercy and Bev with To The Point.
Good morning, it's 11:05. This is To The Point on GB News with Bev Turner and myself, Mercy Moroki. We're on your TV, radio and online.
Well, yesterday, of course, Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced he will step down as PM in the autumn. So what happens now? That's what we're going to be asking today.
Yes, first we'll look at what's next for Boris Johnson as he finally leaves number 10, although not quite yet. Is he facing political oblivion? Will he run for party leader again? That would be probably the most stupid decision he's made yet. But anyway, political consultant Peter Barnes will join us to give his thoughts on that.
How will the Tory revolt and ousting of the Prime Minister impact our relationship with Ukraine as the war with Russia rages on? We're going to be joined by a pro-Boris Ukrainian MP to see how Boris Johnson's resignation was received in his country.
Yes, and finally, we are the People's Channel, after all, here at GB News. So we're joined by one of you, our GB viewers and listeners, to get your thoughts on all the political goings on. We've heard so much from journalists, from commentators and from politicians over the last few days, but we really want to know what people at home think.
That's right, all of that is coming up and much more across the programme. And you can get in touch with your views, gbviews at gbnews.uk.
Now, I don't know if you've heard, but the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has resigned as leader of the Conservative Party, saying that he fought to remain in power as he felt it was his duty, but finally had to step down as he said that was, quote, the will of his party.
His decision follows 3 days of revolt from within his own party that saw almost 60 MPs, including 5 cabinet ministers, quit.
Yes, well, however, the Prime Minister is set to continue in the role he describes as the best job in the world. That's until a successor is chosen.
The straw that broke Boris Johnson's back began on the 29th of June here at this private members' Tory club in central London. What happened here and how the PM dealt with it was the final nail in the coffin for his premiership.
2 days later, on the 1st of July, a story is printed alleging Tory Tamworth MP Chris Pincher was drunkenly groping men at the Carlton Club. He resigns as Deputy Chief Whip, saying he embarrassed himself after drinking too much, but denies the other allegations.
The same day, Number 10 says the PM wasn't aware of specific allegations against Chris Pincher. But later that day, Parliament's watchdog receives a complaint against Chris Pincher and the whip is withdrawn from him. In other words, he now sits as an independent MP.
On July the 3rd and 4th, 2 ministers both publicly say the PM didn't know about any specific allegations against Chris Pincher before making him Deputy Chief Whip in February. Then later on July the 4th, the line from Number 10 shifts. The Prime Minister was aware of some allegations.
On July the 5th, Dominic Raab admits that Chris Pincher was investigated in 2019 over alleged inappropriate behaviour while he was a minister here at the Foreign Office.
Half an hour later, former Chief Diplomat Simon MacDonald publishes a letter alleging Boris Johnson did know about the 2019 investigation and warning Number 10 it needs to come clean.
4.5 hours later, it did.
The Prime Minister did not immediately recall the conversation in late 2019 about this incident.
6 hours later came this.
You know, if I had my time again, I would think back on it and recognise that he wasn't going to learn any lesson, and he wasn't going to change.
2 minutes later, his health secretary resigns. 7 minutes later, his chancellor. By 9:30 a.m. on Thursday, 59 members of the government had resigned. Boris Johnson then quit, making him number 60.
The herd instinct is powerful. When the herd moves, it moves. And, my friends, in politics, no one is remotely indispensable.
Operation Save Big Dog had failed. Paul Hawkins, GB News.
So, joining us now to give us the latest is our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. He's outside Number 10. Tom, I presume you've got out of your sleeping bag there on the pavement this morning. You've been working ever so hard. Just tell me, what was your response to the Prime Minister's speech yesterday? We were on air when he was writing that particular copy. We heard he had two versions to go out, like he did at Brexit time. Yeah. But what did you personally, as a political correspondent, think of his outgoing speech there at the lectern?
Well, clearly the Prime Minister wanted to project a sense of stability and his normal optimistic self. So to some extent it was a robust speech, but I couldn't help but feeling fairly moved by it in a sense. It spoke of the colossal mandate that the British public gave this Prime Minister 3 years ago. It spoke of how much more he had to do and the tough game that politics is. Also, in listing some of the achievements of his administration, to some extent it felt like he was Prime Minister for longer than 3 years. But politics is a brutal game, and unlike the words that we heard from David Cameron or indeed Theresa May that were to some extent more emotional, what we saw from Boris Johnson was a more solid front yesterday. However, I think the caveat here is that often it's not the speech of resignation that is remembered. Few people remember the speech that Theresa May gave when she announced her resignation. What we all remember is the speech she gave when she left Downing Street for the last time. And she said those immortal words, what a privilege it had been for her to serve the country that she loved, breaking her voice on those final words, showing the emotion that so many people hadn't seen from Theresa May throughout her premiership, but getting the nickname the Maybot being so unemotional. So that wasn't her resignation speech, that was her final leaving speech. And similarly, when it's the final leaving of, for example, Gordon Brown appearing outside that door with his family, and we didn't often see his family, it was the only time we saw his children. With David Cameron leaving for the last time, we heard him whistle as he went back in the door. And with Margaret Thatcher leaving Downing Street for the last time, she gave an impromptu speech, one where she said she's leaving Downing Street for the last time after 11 and a half wonderful years, and she was very proud to be leaving Britain in a very much better state than she found it just 11 and a half short years ago. Those were her words, impromptu as they were, as she was leaving Downing Street. So I think to some extent we might be reading too much into these prepared words read at that lectern upon the announcement of the resignation. And what history may remember more is the words that are still yet to come, the words that Boris Johnson will use when he leaves that famous black door for the last time.
OK, thank you, Tom. Thank you very much.
Yeah, something tells me we probably won't see Boris Johnson shedding a tear when he resigns.
I wonder what to make of this. You know, we were quipping...
Well, when he leaves, rather.
Off air yesterday, I was sort of joking that maybe they had summer plans and that was why he wasn't going to go straight away. And then it transpires in the paper that they might be having a checkers party as a sort of postscript to their wedding. That I don't know what to make of that story. I mean, he is following protocol. He shouldn't just disappear and ride off into the sunset at the moment. He should remain in that position to give some stability to the political landscape at the moment until a new leader and Prime Minister is elected.
Well, yeah, we rely on custom very much, don't we, here in the UK? Our political system does, so it'd be very bizarre to suddenly break that. And we can actually be joined by Peter Barnes, who's a political consultant and strategist, who can answer all these questions we're posing. Thank you for joining us in the studio, Peter. Look, what do you think Boris Johnson's position is now? We know he's resigned, that's out of the way now. Moving forward over the next few weeks, what's going to be happening in Downing Street and around Westminster?
So realistically, it all comes down to what happens on Monday at the 1922 committee when they kind of set out the rules for the leadership election, because there is a great sense within the party now that people want Boris just to go. Because in a weird way, everything has changed and then nothing has changed. This has kind of been the phrase that a lot of us have been using around SW1 for quite some time, that everything's all up in the air, everything's chaos, but yet everything stays exactly the same. A lot of people want Boris just to go, to kind of draw a firm line under everything, then have the Tory leadership campaign and then just start anew. Whether the media and whether the Labour Party are going to allow that to happen, I find very hard to believe. But I think the party is kind of desperate just to draw a line under all of this and move on. But we're going to have to wait and see.
I do wonder, though, if it was to happen that, you know, Boris Johnson sort of leaves with immediate effect and somebody takes his place, it would be Dominic Raab, really, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be a bit of a poison chalice? I mean, why would why would it be in the interest of somebody who might potentially run to be a leader or put themselves forward, to kind of take on this toxic Westminster environment in the last few weeks when nothing really will be done? In these weeks, there'll be a lot of infighting. Just leave Boris to do it and then start fresh.
There is a strong argument for that. I think, from what I've read, I think Dom's ruled himself out of standing. But, yeah, I have to admit, I don't know which person really wants to take on any of this mess, whether it just be the current situation or the entire economic problem that we've got, the problem in Ukraine, the Northern Ireland problem. I mean, you have to really want this job to actually put your name forward right now. So yesterday, Westminster was absolutely crazy with everybody lobbying, just saying, like, oh, who are you backing? A lot of MPs were out on the terrace questioning, asking very subtly, like, oh, which side are you sitting with? It's all very kind of high school at the minute. You know, like, you can't sit with us, like, who's on the popular table? And there's a small part of me that thinks, come on, let's grow up a little bit. But then when you're kind of in the kind of middle of it all, it is quite a lot of fun, really, this time. But
well, like you're saying, Peter, it's sort of this strange limbo. It feels a little bit like yesterday was Christmas Day, and we'll have New Year's Day when we get the new PM, and we're in that middle bit between Christmas and New Year. You know, when you're never quite sure what day it is.
Exactly.
It's a bit like that, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. I'm pretty sure for the last 6 months I've been saying, what day is it, where I'm supposed to be? But
but there's also, just to continue my metaphor a little longer, there's something quite nice about that week between Christmas and New Year. The pressure is off, right? And I think the country, even though a lot of our viewers and listeners are getting in touch to say, this doesn't matter to us, we just want the actual practical problems of our life sorting out. Can they just stop playing politics? This is an important period of time because whoever does take on that lead has to deal with the post-New Year hangover, the post-COVID, post-lockdown, the hangover that we're dealing with. It, like you say, is anyone going to, whoever takes that job, have they got a good shot, in your professional opinion, of remaining in that job for years, or will it be a blink of an eye?
Oh, there's a question. I think whoever takes on the job has got, like you said, some really big shoes to fill and also some issues to tackle. But I don't just think it's about the person, it's about the direction that the party now take. For me, getting rid of Boris was kind of step one. What I think the party needs to do now is have a kind of complete U-turn on its certain policies. For example, the green stuff, I think we need to rein some of that stuff back in. The tax cuts are an absolute must, again, integrate the cost of living. It's not really just who the person is that I'm looking at. I'm looking at what do they actually plan to do. Yeah. And I know there's a very big obsession at the minute with the personalities of everybody, but what I really want to hear is an actual debate about where they want the country to go and how, and more importantly, how they're going to do it.
And what is it to be a Conservative in 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, 100%. I do one thing that I've always liked about the Conservatives is that they are very much of a broad church. There's lots of different types of Conservatives. So what I really want this time, and unlike the last election between Jeremy Hunt and Boris Johnson, that was just dominated by Brexit. And what I want at this time round is I want a proper debate. I want the actual hustings. I want to hear what they want to say on more than one issue. And I actually think because we focused so hard on Brexit last time, that nobody really thought, well, once Jeremy Corbyn's done and Brexit has got done, then what? Nobody thought further than their own 2 feet. And I think this is why we're in a little bit of the mess that we're in.
I agree. Thank you, Peter. Treve in Cornwall got in touch to say Boris Johnson will move to the US, where he was born, and in 10 years' time, he'll be the Republican candidate for the US presidency. With regard to Tugendhat, he will divide the party and country with his pro-EU views.
Not a bad idea, and I'm sure maybe he'll do a reality show, sort of keeping up with the Johnsons
for Pfizer, Moderna and AstraZeneca for the rest of his life.
You can't forget the man, regardless of what you think of him, he has made,
in my opinion,
he has made a career out of being very charismatic. You know, that's what has got him so far. He's very clever. I mean, many people underestimate how very, very clever he is. They see him as a bit of a buffoon most of the time, but he's also very charismatic. And that will serve him really well going forward when he's not Prime Minister. His personality will really come out, and he'll be doing all sorts. And, you know, I say good for him.
Oh.
You're not convinced?
I wouldn't buy a ticket to watch him talk.
They'll be very expensive.
I'll put it like that. Yeah, they will.
Well, after the break, we look into whether the Ukraine-UK relationship will weaken after Tory MP forced Boris Johnson's resignation. Of course, he is very popular in Ukraine, so that should be interesting. That's after this weather.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Plenty of warm summer sunshine for the vast majority, not just today, but for the next week or so. There's always an exception, and it will be cloudier at times in the north through the rest of the day as a weak weather front sinks south around the top of an area of high pressure, which will increasingly drive our weather heading into the weekend. So with that high pressure, actually a lot of sunshine for England, Wales, for northern and eastern Scotland as well. I think southwest Scotland, parts of northwest England, Northern Ireland, we'll see that thicker cloud at times and perhaps a few spots of rain and drizzle, mostly towards the likes of Dumfries and Galloway. So a bit cooler here, 20 Celsius, but otherwise mid to high 20s for many, peaking at 29 degrees there towards the southeast. And then the area of cloud that I mentioned, that sinks slowly southwards and tends to fizzle out. A few showers will turn up for the far north of Scotland overnight, along with a keen breeze. And with clouds sinking south into Wales and the Midlands, well, that will keep temperatures up in the teens. But even where we get clear spells, it's a relatively mild night, 12 or 13 Celsius the low as we start off the weekend. So a cloudier spell for Northern Ireland, for parts of northern Scotland, as well as, at first, Wales and southern England. By lunchtime, however, that cloud disappears, and for many, yet again, it's a blue skies day for much of England, Wales, southern Scotland. Plenty of sunshine. 21 Celsius for Glasgow, 27 for London. But for the north of Scotland, here it will be cloudier. There'll be some showery rain in the far north of the mainland, as well as Orkney and Lewis, and I think that rain will make it feel a bit cooler. However, that rain in the far north is where it stays really for the rest of the weekend, because for the vast majority, that high pressure keeps things fine with plenty of sunshine continuing into next week, and it will turn even hotter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory. twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Hello, this is To The Point with Bev Turner and Mercy Moroki on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, now, in his resignation speech yesterday, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, took the time to address the nation, or the situation in Ukraine, to the people of Ukraine.
And in the last few months, leading the West in standing up to Putin's aggression in Ukraine. And let me say now to the people of Ukraine that I know that we in the UK will continue to back your fight for freedom for as long as it takes.
I know some people online weren't very happy about him mentioning that on what seemed like a big day domestically, but the Prime Minister is immensely popular there. Art depicting the Prime Minister brandishing Ukrainian colours have sprung up in Kyiv's galleries and online since his first visit to the country in April. Look how weird that is.
Yeah, we're showing a graphic currently for those listening to us on radio of Boris Johnson. It's a painting of Boris Johnson sitting in a field playing, what was that, a banjo?
It's like a mandolin, isn't it? Isn't that
anyway,
a mandolin?
Yeah. Well, the Ukrainian foreign minister has even described him as, quote, a true friend of Ukraine. So how has the Prime Minister stepping down been received by the Ukrainian public?
Ukrainian MP Oleksiy Goncharenko joins us now. Good morning. We were just looking at some of the artwork, sort of deifying Boris Johnson as a kind of saintly, godly, kind of medieval figure there. Is that really how the Ukrainian people see him?
Yeah, we are very thankful to Boris Johnson, to Prime Minister Johnson, for all support that Ukraine was receiving. I'm now connection with you from Ukrainian Parliament. We now have a meeting, and as you can see how it looks, the Ukrainian Parliament with the windows like a fortress, with the windows which are filled with bags with sand and things like this. And we are in such situation.
Oh,
I think we've lost.
Okay, I don't know what's going on there. Well, that was Oleksiy Goncharenko, who's a Ukrainian MP. As you can tell, I think he's been disrupted. They're not sure by what, but he was just
sandbags against the window.
Yeah, he was just talking about sandbags against the window. He's in Kyiv in the parliament at the moment. Obviously, it's sort of been reinforced, I suppose, to prevent it from attacks. We can go to Peter Barnes again, a political consultant and commentator. You know, as we mentioned there, Boris Johnson, incredibly popular in Ukraine. But I do wonder, wasn't he bound to be popular because of how much the UK government has supported Ukraine? Or do you think there's something special, specific about Boris Johnson that the Ukrainian people like?
I think when it comes to the response to Ukraine, I think this is probably one of Boris Johnson's crowning achievements. He's led the international community. Like, America's been nowhere near the kind of support that Boris Johnson has given to the people of Ukraine. And I think they've named either a town square or a street after him. Like, I know we've been talking about what he's going to do after. If I was Boris Johnson, I'd move to Ukraine, simply go and then run to be a politician there, because I think he'd be a walk-in. It would be quite interesting, but...
Quite a few people who'd like him to move to Ukraine.
Yeah, that's true. But,
not for quite the same reasons. But this is what Boris Johnson got into politics for, isn't it? The adulation, the adoration. He loves to be seen on the global stage as this Churchillian character in a time of war. I mean, you know, basking in a lot of glory over there. But every time we interview somebody from Ukraine, they do express how important that has been to them.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, what's interesting is that just how much this has meant to Boris and how he's just thrown himself into this issue more than pretty much anything else. You know, and I think people are right to say, well, shouldn't he really be focusing on domestic issues? It's a very fair argument to make. But I think with the passion to which he talks about Ukraine and just how much he really gets involved, I think this is a real personal mission for him. And I think with him stepping down, I think this is probably his biggest regret, that he doesn't get to see the end of this and continue on that world stage.
Yeah, and it's interesting, actually, because we all morning we've been mentioning how Ben Wallace is sort of at the top of the list at the moment in terms of polling for who could be the next leader. And, in fact, at the bookies, he's Secretary of State for Defence. Do you think that will bode well for him in terms of going forward, looking forward, and what will happen with the war of Ukraine? Because, of course, he has been very much at the centre of all that kind of area of policy.
Oh, yeah. Again, Ben Wallace, I think it was on Monday, said, I'm not interested in political parlour games. I've got a war to win.
Yeah.
You know, he's thrown himself into this issue. And I can imagine being Secretary of Defence at the minute, that, yeah, of course, that's his sole focus and you kind of can't see anything else. It is interesting that he's not really come out to say that he's going to run to be the next leader, but people are just taking it as a presumption that he's going to. I think he's, according to, I think it was on Twitter, he's sounding things out. So that means he probably is going to run. But for the party to judge him on whether he should be Prime Minister, I'd like to hear him on the economy, on taxation, immigration.
We know he's good at giving bombs to Ukraine, but we don't actually know what else
and everything else. And I think everyone's just judging him on his response. And he might come up a bit short if we suddenly find out that, you know, he's in favour of putting more taxes up.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, won't it? We're very pleased to say that Alexei Goncharenko is back with us. Thank you so much. Can we ask you, Alexei, where are you right now?
I am in the Parliament building, and now we have a meeting of the Parliament. I came out from the hall to speak with you. And I just want to tell you that probably Boris Johnson is the most popular international politician in Ukraine. And really he showed leadership when this war started. And in general, the United Kingdom showed leadership. And we are very thankful for this. Who will be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is internal affairs of the citizens of the UK. We have all respect and we're sure that this person will be great as Prime Minister. But also we need to say a very big thank you to Boris for everything which was done. I understand that in general that is the position of the United Kingdom society to support Ukraine. But also Boris invested in this so much of his charisma and energy. And I think it is important both for Ukraine and the United Kingdom because the whole international security depends on what's going on in Ukraine today.
It really does. And can we just ask you, we are talking about Boris Johnson, but it feels right to ask you, Alexei, how are things over in Kyiv where you are at the moment?
It looks like normal before we have one new attack or something like this. As you see the Parliament building, you see how it looks like a fortress. This is Ukrainian Parliament and the windows in the building. We know that there is a possibility that Russia can try to make a missile attack against the building where we are gathering and where we have meetings. But for us, it's important to continue to work in our building, not somewhere in shelters, just to show that the country is alive. Even at the moment when Russians were just several kilometers from here, we were in the parliamentary building. Several weeks with Kalashnikov in my hands, I was one of those who in territorial defense were defending also the governmental quarter and our building. So that is also one of symbols that despite the fact of this awful war against Ukraine, our institutions work democratic institutions work, Ukrainian parliament work, and the laws in the country are adopted only by the parliament. So we are really a European and civilized country, even in such a situation. Very difficult, but we are doing our best.
OK, thank you ever so much for joining us. Ukrainian MP there, Alexei Goncharenko. Thank you very much, sir. Still with us for reaction is political consultant and strategist Peter Barnes. We're going to come back to you in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. But after the break, we visit the constituencies of some of the MPs who've already thrown their hat into the Tory leadership contest. Will the party voters back their run for the top job? But before that, a look at this morning's news.
Good morning, it's 11:34. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has died after being shot at a campaign event. He was giving a speech in the western city of Nara when he was shot from behind. He later died in hospital. A doctor there says he bled to death from 2 deep wounds, one to his heart and one to his neck. Police say a 41-year-old man has been arrested. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has paid tribute to Abe, saying his global leadership through uncharted times will be remembered by many. Back here, the race for who's going to replace Boris Johnson as Prime Minister following his resignation yesterday as leader of the Conservative Party has begun. With no clear front runner, around a dozen potential candidates are assessing whether they have the support to mount leadership bids. Tom Tugendhat, the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee chairman, has become the first contender to throw his hat in the ring. It's believed former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and ex-Health Secretary Sajid Javid could also be considering the job. Meanwhile, there's growing pressure on Boris Johnson to step down immediately rather than wait for a new leader. Former Prime Minister Sir John Major is among those backing Deputy PM Dominic Raab to take over in the interim. But Downing Street said Mr Johnson feels a strong sense of duty to stay on. And former FIFA President Sepp Blatter and ex-UEFA President Michel Platini have been acquitted of corruption by a Swiss court. The pair had stood trial over a payment in 2011 of £1.7 million made by Blatter, the head of FIFA at the time, to Platini, who ran UEFA. Both men had denied wrongdoing and said the transfer was belated payment for Platini's advisory work for FIFA. TV Online and DAB+ Radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy $1.197 and 1.182 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,451.76 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across, absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with Bev Turner and me, Mercy Moroki. It's 11:38 and we're live on your TV, online and radio.
Now, the race to replace Boris Johnson as Conservative Party leader has begun. The Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab and former Secretary of State for Housing Michael Gove have both been ruled out. They've ruled themselves out.
Yes, so who are the main contenders and therefore who could become our next Prime Minister, of course, if... Well, they will be Prime Minister, and then if they lose a general election, they won't be Prime Minister anymore. It's all very complicated at the moment, isn't it? Well, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, tells us more.
For a long time, Rishi Sunak seemed the likely favourite in any leadership contest after he pushed through billions of extra funding to protect jobs when the pandemic struck. But the former Chancellor's stock took a bit of a battering more recently, following the revelations that his wife had non-domicile status for tax purposes and he'd held onto his US green card while serving in the government. But he still remains pretty popular within the party. In recent months, the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has clearly been positioning herself for a leadership run, appearing at times to channel her inner Margaret Thatcher with her high-profile interventions and photo opportunities. She has strong grassroots support within the party, and the war in Ukraine has certainly pushed up her public profile. It's done the same for the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace. The former army officer has been widely praised for his deft handling of the UK's military response to the crisis, a key figure in providing support and training for Ukraine's armed forces. He's admired as a highly capable cabinet minister who has widespread support from all wings of the party. Although he's played down any interest in the top job, he's a definite contender. Suella Braverman became the first cabinet minister to publicly announce her intention to stand during a television interview on Wednesday night. She was appointed Boris Johnson's Attorney General 2 years ago. She's positioning herself as an anti-woke candidate, but for now at least, she's not seen as one of the favourites. Tory rebel Steve Baker has pretty much confirmed he'll also be running for the top job. The Brexiteer, who played a leading role in orchestrating the resignation of Theresa May, might struggle to win over many on the left wing of the party, but he told GB News he's getting lots of support from serious figures.
And I'm doing it out of respect for Conservative Home readers and the many people who I'm afraid, to the disappointment of my critics, are in fact lighting up my phone, encouraging me to go for it. You know, people have watched me provide leadership for 7 years, sometimes for up to a third of the Conservative Party, and successfully.
Coming second to Boris Johnson in the last leadership election, Jeremy Hunt has been out of office for the past 3 years. But there's little doubt the former Foreign Secretary will seize the opportunity to throw his hat back into the ring. Although his strong support for tough lockdown measures during the pandemic won't sit well with some in the party. Well, less than 2 days after accepting the job as Chancellor and then robustly supporting Boris Johnson on the airwaves, Nadhim Zahawi pretty much wielded the killer blow by very publicly demanding the Prime Minister's resignation. Little surprise to those in the party who say he's been quietly plotting a leadership bid for months. He's certainly seen as a safe pair of hands. Well, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is highly popular on the right of the party, where they support her tough line on the small boats crisis. But her plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda have run into inevitable legal obstacles. Her staunch support of Boris Johnson, while many others called on him to go, might also impact on her chances. The former Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, was the first to resign on Tuesday, sparking the final push to get rid of Boris Johnson. The former Chancellor and Home Secretary, he certainly has the political pedigree for the top job. He may not have the charisma of some of the other candidates, but he's clearly trying to position himself as a man of integrity. Back in January, Tom Tugendhat, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, announced his intention to stand for leader should Boris Johnson be turfed out. A Remain supporter in 2016, the former soldier might struggle to cut through with many Brexiteers in the party, but he's greatly admired as a very capable and thoughtful politician.
Thank you, Mark. He's brilliant, isn't he? You know, Mark Wright. That is such we could listen to his voice all day. He's such a great analyst. Here for more analysis, though, now is Chris Bowers, political commentator and a former Lib Dem candidate. Good morning to you, Chris. Just your response, really, to the runners and riders you've just heard there. It feels a bit like Grand National we're talking about here, isn't it? Who would you put your money on? Narrow it down to two for me, Chris.
Well, I'm going to answer a slightly different question. I'm going to tell you the two who I think Labour and the Liberal Democrats will most fear, and that's Ben Wallace and Tom Tugendhat, because I think that those are the two who could actually end up giving Labour, giving the Conservatives a veneer of respectability that the Labour and Lib Dems and other opposition parties would find it harder to oppose. Whether that means that Wallace and Tugendhat will do well, I don't know. But, you know, at the end of the day, the electorate in this is initially the Conservative MPs, the parliamentary party, and then the Conservative membership. Will they look at who will most trouble Labour and the Lib Dems? I don't know, but I suspect those are the two who might.
And who, on the opposite side, who do you think they would most like to see in, because it would almost give them further ammunition? Because we know Sir Keir Starmer, he spends a lot of his time sort of criticising Boris Johnson for the character, the man that he is. Who will he be able to continue doing that with, do you think, if they were to become leader?
Well, I guess the closest to Johnson, in the sense that he was the gift that kept on giving. And I think in many ways, Keir Starmer, as a moderately grey figure, is somebody who I think has scored well against Boris Johnson when people perhaps have been worried about Johnson. So the more flamboyant, the more right-wing the figure that the Conservatives choose to be the new leader, I think the more it will suit Labour and the Lib Dems. I think the Lib Dems' position in this is also important, because Lib Dems do well at general elections when people don't fear the leader of the opposition. If Keir Starmer is thought of as a person that many people would be happy to have as Prime Minister, then a lot of people would be willing to vote Lib Dem, perhaps to be a protest against the Conservatives, perhaps to effect a change of government, or even to force a hung parliament. If people don't like the leader of the opposition, as happened in 2015 with Ed Miliband, 2017 and 19 with Corbyn, then I think they're less likely to vote for outside one of the two main parties. And therefore, I think where the leadership of the Conservative Party leads Keir Starmer will have ripple effects to the rest of politics.
OK, Chris, can I just ask you, what match are you watching today? You're at Wimbledon, aren't you?
Well, there's only one singles match. Yes, I am. This is the day job alongside the politics. Obviously, I'll be watching Norrie against Djokovic, but I'm also keeping an eye on Nick Kyrgios, who's due to talk to us in about just over an hour's time. Interesting to see what he says ahead of his first final on Sunday, when he hasn't had to play a semi.
Fantastic. Thank you. Have a great day. Chris Bowers there, political commentator and tennis writer and commentator, it would seem.
Perfect weather to be spectating. You wouldn't want to be playing in that heat, really, would you? Isn't there a heat wave due to come back?
This is the stage of Wimbledon when I get interested, anyway. Right, now, so what do some of the voters in these contenders' constituencies think about their MP as Tory leader? Well, here to tell us are our reporters Ellie Costello, who's in Jeremy Hunt's constituency, and Jeff Moody in Suella Braverman's constituency. Ellie, good morning. Let's start with you. What is the mood like down there, and what are the people on the street saying to you?
Well, good morning to you both and welcome to sunny Haslemere, which is a beautiful town in Surrey, and southwest Surrey, as you say, is Jeremy Hunt's seat. He has held it since 2005, and talking to people here today, he seems to be a very popular MP. People are telling me he's a great listener, very good constituency MP, and they think he'd be a very good Tory party leader. The Independent newspaper has put him actually as a front runner with Tom Tugendhat this morning in a poll. So let's talk to someone who knows Jeremy Hunt. This is Christopher Ashton-Jones. He's a local business owner and resident. Christopher, thank you so much for joining us here this morning. What do you make of Jeremy Hunt as a man, and what do you think he'd make as a Tory party leader?
Good morning. I think he'd make an extremely good leader of the party and of the country. In fact, I've always supported Jeremy. I supported him when the election came up between him and Boris. I went to all his hustings. He's got a great way. You can trust Jeremy. He's got integrity. When he's interviewed on the media, he says things as they are. There's no fluff. He's a great constituency member. We see him around Haslemere and in all the other towns in the constituency a lot. He helps save our health centre in Haslemere. He's done a lot of work with the Royal Surrey County Hospital, particularly with its cancer wing. Our business celebrated its 20th anniversary back in May, and we had a small celebration, and who came along but Jeremy, and said a few kind words. So he's a good man. He supports a lot of causes in the area. He lives in the constituency. He's a family man. We all recognise what a good man he is in the constituency, but also what a great parliamentarian he is. He did a term as Foreign Secretary, and he did some excellent things as Foreign Secretary. He's been chairman of the Health Select Committee for many years, and supported by all sides of the House in doing that job, and recognised as doing a particularly good job there. So no, I'm still very much behind Jeremy. When he put his name in the ring to become leader last time, he did it in Haslemere. As part of our Haslemere Festival, he comes along and gives the last address, and it was a packed meeting. Everyone comes along to listen to Jeremy, and it was then that he said, and I'm going to stand for election as leader of the party and Prime Minister, and huge jubilation at that meeting. So no, we give him a great deal of support. We need someone who we can trust, who we can look up to, who we believe. Someone who, when you see on the media, you know he's saying it straight to you. There's no fluff. And he's also got this, I don't know, ethics seems an extraordinary thing to have to talk about with Prime Ministers. I can't see why a Prime Minister, the biggest position in the land, the proudest, representing us abroad, representing us people, setting standards by which we should behave. Why you should need an ethics advisor, I just can't understand. And for Boris to have had two, both who've resigned their positions, both being men of considerable honour and standing, is extraordinary.
Yes, so for you it's integrity and trust, and those are things that you think Jeremy Hunt embodies. Well, there you go, that's what Christopher Ashton-Jones thinks, but as you just heard from Mark White there, the list of runners and riders is extensive, and all of these people are more than capable and highly motivated individuals that would do a very good job, and we should find out next week who those final two, or in the next few weeks at least, who those final two front runners will be.
Well, Ellie, thanks for bringing us those views from Jeremy Hunt's constituency there. Let's quickly go to Jeff Moody, who's in Suella Braverman's constituency, Attorney General. We do have a couple of viewers who we're going to talk to live in a second, Jeff, so we do have to be very quick with you, unfortunately. What do people think in Suella Braverman's constituency? Because she did sort of pop out of nowhere with this bid, basically, for leadership.
People here are very excited that the prospect of their MP becoming Britain's third Prime Minister, but there is a sense that she probably doesn't stand much chance, mainly because she's not as well known as some of the other candidates. But people are certainly saying that it's going to be good for her career, good for her profile. She announced her nomination live on air. She was doing an interview for Robert Peston on ITV, and he asked her directly, would she stand? And she said yes. And that is being seen here as very refreshing, a politician that gives a direct, straight and honest answer to a question. So she scored well there. As to what sort of Prime Minister she would make, she's a little bit more to the right of the party than Boris Johnson is, who certainly tried to tread the middle way as much as he could. She's a staunch Brexiteer, and a lot of people here followed suit with her. They voted alongside her. 55% of people here in Fareham voted for Brexit. She also chaired the European Research Group, a pro-leave group of Conservative MPs. So she's very much at the forefront of Brexit. In 2018, she was appointed the Parliamentary Under-Secretary for the EU, but she was one of the ones that quit when in protest at the way that Theresa May was handling the situation. A political scandal that now seems in the dim and distant past, but was extremely important back in the day. When it comes to the woke, anti-woke thing, she's very much anti-woke. She was one of the first people to coin the phrase cultural Marxism. She said, we have a culture evolving from the far left, which is about sniffing out freedom of speech. Whether that plays well with the electorate, we'll find out soon enough.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Ellie, ever so much. We've heard from political commentators, pollsters, MPs, experts, but we want to know what you think, so we are delighted to be joined by GB viewer Zoe Holt. Zoe, hello, good morning. Thank you for coming on. What do you make of Boris's resignation, Zoe? We are waiting for Zoe.
She's coming, don't worry.
There you go, Zoe. You just had a taste of what it is to be a political pundit. The technology doesn't always work, but go, Zoe. What do you think?
All right, don't worry. And I don't think it's just me, I just think there's so much anger. I think the Daily Mail got it absolutely right this morning. I don't know what on earth the Tory party thinks it's doing. I actually just want to say thank you to you guys for letting poor proletariat like us actually have a voice. You know, you hear all these strategists, pundits, political elite, the political classes. We're the people, the poor saps who actually pay these MPs' salaries through taxes. We're the ones that vote them in. Absolutely furious.
Wow, we can really sense your fury, and many people will be sharing your position. But Boris Johnson has, of course, now announced he's resigning. Is there anybody in your eyes who could replace him that you would feel you could back and that you could trust?
Absolutely not. We're talking, this is absolute madness. So I've heard you guys talking this morning about who could follow him on. And it seems to me this is all about his personality. And we're saying we're having to replace Boris because of he's a flawed character. Well, if you can actually pick out one of these contenders who hasn't got any kind of human flaw in their character, I'll be amazed. They've already shown their lack of loyalty. It's just absolute nonsense.
And Zoe, it's part of the frustration, not just the way they're behaving, but the fact that it feels like whilst we're talking about this, we're not talking about the really important issues which are affecting everybody at the moment.
Yeah, while this has been going on, how many boats have bobbed across the sea in the last 2 or 3 days, in the last week? How many people have been waiting for hospital appointments? How many people have been waiting for GP appointments? How many crimes have been committed that aren't going to get solved? And meanwhile, these MPs who we pay them, and they've absolutely, I cannot believe the stupidity and the selfishness of them.
Well, Zoe, you're not alone, I don't think. I'm sure our inbox is going to be flooded as soon as you come off with people who share your sentiment. Thank you so much for coming on, Zoe Holt there, one of our viewers and listeners. That is it from us here at To The Point. You're not going to be back
Friday, I'm gone.
No, I'm going to be back with Patrick. If he makes it back from his holiday, who knows with flight cancellations at the moment.
I'm back on the bench. I might be back soon. I'll let you know.
Yeah, well, don't go away. Up next is The Briefing with Alistair Stewart and Mark Longhurst. See you on Monday.
Bye for now.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Plenty of warm summer sunshine for the vast majority, not just today, but for the next week or so. There's always an exception, and it will be cloudier at times in the north through the rest of the day as a weak weather front sinks south around the top of an area of high pressure, which will increasingly drive our weather heading into the weekend. So with that high pressure, actually a lot of sunshine for England, Wales, for northern and eastern Scotland as well. I think southwest Scotland, parts of northwest England, Northern Ireland, we'll see that thicker cloud at times and perhaps a few spots of rain and drizzle, mostly towards the likes of Dumfries and Galloway. So a bit cooler here, 20 Celsius, but otherwise mid to high 20s for many, peaking at 29 degrees there towards the southeast. And then the area of cloud that I mentioned, that sinks slowly southwards and tends to fizzle out. A few showers will turn up for the far north of Scotland overnight, along with a keen breeze. And with clouds sinking south into Wales and the Midlands, well, that will keep temperatures up in the teens. But even where we get clear spells, it's a relatively mild night, 12 or 13 Celsius the low, as we start off the weekend. So a cloudier spell for Northern Ireland, for parts of northern Scotland, as well as, at first, Wales and southern England. By lunchtime, however, that cloud disappears, and for many, yet again, it's a blue skies day for much of England, Wales, southern Scotland. Plenty of sunshine. 21 Celsius for Glasgow, 27 for London. But for the north of Scotland, here it will be cloudier. There'll be some showery rain in the far north of the mainland, as well as Orkney and Lewis, and I think that rain will make it feel a bit cooler. However, that rain in the far north is where it stays really for the rest of the weekend, because for the vast majority, that high pressure keeps things fine with plenty of sunshine continuing.